Hey, what are some house rules that you don't see too much that you actually think are good? A barbarian dragonborn's breath weapon counts as an attack for keeping up rage. Some DMs say it doesn't produce an attack roll, so it doesn't count. But I think a crazed dragonborn won't calm down from spewing hellfire out his mouth. The player as a human being may have forgotten something, but the Paragon-level fighter certainly would have known that knowledge. That's the house rule we play by at our table. It makes it so the players aren't unnecessarily punished for being under the weather, and the characters don't make rookie mistakes when they should be considered veterans. For example, if you forgot to use extra attack, we'll say, "Hey, you just ended your turn 5 seconds ago. Go ahead and do that attack." It creates a more fun, laid-back, and engaging atmosphere rather than an antagonistic DM versus players vibe. Of course, this goes hand in hand with, you as a player may have outside knowledge, but your character won't know anything other than what's being conveyed and what they noticed. And this part is enforced rigorously. This prevents most of the shenanigans that people worry the first rule would open up. My player group recently came up with an answer to the question, what if I want to hit a specific spot on the enemy with an attack? Originally, we thought about increasing the armor class, but we came up with using a percentage die after determining if there was a hit on the attack roll. If the attack hits, roll percentage. The DM then decides what percentage is needed to hit that specific target. Let's just say like the enemy's eye. And if you make the percentage DC, you hit the eye. If not, it's still a hit, just not in the eye, and you still roll for damage. It's been a great source of flavor for our group, especially since we're in a campaign where we're fighting tons of giants and want to blind them with arrows. I allow players to train other party members to obtain skill, tool, language, weapon, and armor proficiencies, provided that the trainer has them. It takes 90 days, 1 hour a day, 8 hours of training counts as 2 days, and each person can only train or be trained by one person at a time. Mage Slayer. When a creature within 5 feet of you begins to cast a spell, you can use your reaction to make a melee weapon attack against that creature. If this attack hits, the creature must make a concentration check or lose the spell and the action. There. Now it actually does what it says on the tin. Rolled array for stat generation. Instead of standard array or everyone rolling, the party does 6 rolls of 3d6, and that becomes the array everyone builds their characters from. It has all the initial excitement of rolling stats without the disappointment of rolling lower than everyone else or the guilt of rolling higher. The DM can even balance for everyone being roughly as capable as each other. Every game I've done it in has been fun, and you can use the bartender rule to avoid everyone being miserable. If no stat is above 14, that character becomes a bartender instead of an adventurer. Taking 10, taking 20. If the PC isn't pressed for time or in initiative order, they are allowed to commit more time to a task and treat it as if they rolled a 10 or a 20, depending on how long they take. Here's an example. If they want to ask around a tavern's patrons to see if anyone has seen someone or something they need, they roll if they spend less than an hour. An hour or two, take 10. A full day, take 20. So I do inspiration in a unique way for my players. They get a constantly updating list of tasks tailored only to their character, earning an inspiration point each time they complete a task. These tasks usually connect to the story, help them pick up on plot hooks, and even add foreshadowing, which gets their brains going. The inspiration points can stack like in Baldur's Gate 3, and they can use them whenever. The players just love it. Using sequences of play from older editions. 5th edition is so freeform that most players barely know what they can even attempt to do, and many DMs skip adventuring. There's a lot of gameplay lost because the 5th edition DMG is disorganized and often muddies its own rules. I'm all for not following rules to the letter, but you need to have rules to break in the first place. You gain no benefit from a target being unable to see you if you cannot see your target. Also, an invisible character gains no benefit from being invisible if they can be seen. An archer shouldn't be able to shoot a prone target more easily when blinded by Hunger of Hadar. true sight and see invisibility should negate the advantages of invisibility. I let players talk as much as they want even after combat is rolled. Technically, they only have 6 seconds, and I get that, but to me, the verisimilitude just isn't worth it. D&D is all about improvising and reacting to situations, which requires talking out loud. The whole game is talking. If a player wants to say a plan they just came up with, they can just do that. Technically, they might not have been able to say it in 6 seconds, but the alternative is hearing the plan after combat, which basically misses the point. It also helps with an issue I had where if a villain says something to someone, you have to wait until their turn, and then everyone forgets what exactly was said. I just let them answer even on the villain's turn. So basically, the house rule is, players can talk as long as they like about whatever they like. I've only ever noticed positive results. No one ever says, "That combat was so fake because Tony said 2 whole sentences." But when I tried to enforce the 6-second rule, I had problems with interrupting them to keep it accurate. I really like the way my DM handles resting. It's a bit complicated, but it adds some cool dynamics to long rests. They're broken down into good and bad rests. Good rests are basically anything with a bed. Bad rests are things like camping in the wilderness or sleeping in a cart while traveling. For good rests, you follow the normal rules. For bad rests, you have to use hit dice to heal. But you do get them all back in the end. So the hit dice used are basically free, but you can't heal past what your hit dice allow. In addition, every bad rest in a row decreases the number of hit dice you get back by 1. Every day spent in the wild increases your fatigue. Now, it might not make a ton of realistic sense, but I do think it makes the wilderness feel just a bit more wild without being overly punishing. It took a few iterations and some friendly feedback, but I think it's really cool. Switching from range to melee weapons and vice versa is a free action. No dropping weapons, no spending actions. If your ranger rogue is in melee now, they can draw their shield and sword while stowing their bow before attacking with the shield. If they're back in range, they can stow their shield and sword, draw their bow, and attack in the same turn. It's not rules as written, but it cuts down on bookkeeping and remembering, "Where did I drop my bow?" It keeps power gamers moving and buffs martial classes slightly. Treat it like video game rules, and combat flows so much easier. I play with death saves as private rolls. If a player is down, they'll either get up and roll behind the DM screen or roll somewhere hidden and message me the result for tracking. This increases the tension when someone is down because it's not public knowledge how close to death they are, which is, in my opinion, more realistic. It avoids the talk of, "They're on 2 successes, we don't have to rescue them just yet," that I've had in some fights. In big RP sessions, to cut back on the more socially dominant players taking over an in-game conversation, I have players roll roleplay initiative, where they roll a d20 and add their charisma modifier. It organizes the players for the conversation. Your first death isn't a real death. At my table, for the first death, you receive a critical injury with permanent negative effects. For example, an injured eye gives disadvantage on perception checks that require vision. The injury can be healed with gold. Each subsequent death requires a roll to see if the character survives, with the DC becoming harder each time, and the cost of healing also increases. My DM has a really fun house rule we call Givespiration. Each player has 1 point of inspiration that they can reward to another player once per session. Basically speaking, if someone makes a really cool move or does some good in-character roleplay, we can reward each other. The DM still gives inspiration sometimes, but it encourages us to really pay attention to and support each other's play, and invest in each other's characters. Player cleverness trumps mechanics. If a player comes up with a good idea, I try to say yes in the spirit of being a fan of the players. So obviously this doesn't always work perfectly, but the game becomes just so much more exciting when players feel empowered to do what they like rather than just checking their character sheet. It requires open-mindedness as a DM, since sometimes someone's idea of clever, isn't exactly, and so sometimes it ends up just being a role like anything else. It's also important to be fair. This can be abused by the DM favoring certain players, so impartiality is key to keeping it fun for everyone. I think this was proposed by Bob the World Builder, but I'm not sure I remember correctly. And it's been working really well in my game. Inspiration is a pool of points, and not just one reroll. Basically, any in-character moment, even minor things like asking someone about an NPC from their backstory, earns inspiration points. The players can spend points to increase a roll by the number of points spent, or decrease any roll by half the number of points spent. A player can collect as many points as they want, and they don't disappear between sessions. This encourages players to roleplay continuously, not just once per session. Since the resource isn't as scarce, they'll use it more often and want to earn it more often. It also makes it easier to signal the kind of roleplay the DM wants in their game. As an example, rewarding reasonable haggling or attempts to seduce NPCs without going overboard. Delaying a turn. Say someone has a plan but rolled high or low for initiative, and it messes things up. They or an ally can delay their turn to a certain point in initiative, permanently changing it. For example, if the cleric goes first but wants to act after the fighter, they can delay until after the fighter, or just before the boss, or whatever. Or if the rogue goes last but wants to set up for the barbarian can delay their turn until after the rogue. Now logically, the PCs know what everyone else can do and have several second nature plans. Or they could communicate mid-battle with a quick phrase like, "Hold them down!" or "Get ready!" to coordinate. Metagaming can be a problem, of course, but as the DM, I can veto ideas. Ambushes keep bad initiative until in-character communication can happen, or legendary actions disrupt combos. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Let us know in the comments below what are some house rules that you don't see that much that you think are actually good. And of course, leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and if you want to help out the channel, feel free to join our membership to get extra little bonuses like early access to videos and maybe more. We're working on that. We love you all. We'll see you next time. Toodaloo for now.